We're here at Wells Middle School with Dr. Henning, Mr. Clark, and 3 students discussing the book, Nothing But the Truth.
So, good afternoon, James, Bridget, and Gabrielle. We also have Mr. Clark, your principal here at H.H. Wells, and we also have Mr. Lamoureux, who is the district-wide technology and instructional specialist. And myself, Dr. Henning, who's the superintendent of the Brewster Central School District. The reason that I'm here is that I wanted to talk to James, Bridget, and Gabrielle about their experience with the book that the students at H.H. Wells read called Nothing But the Truth by Avi. I read the book. I really liked the book, and I wasn't able to be here on the day that the whole school had a discussion about the book. So in place of that, I figured this would be a great opportunity to talk to a few students and to do it using through a podcast. So this is a new venture, but it won't be the last one. So I could come back. You could be my podcast team. So James.
Yes, ma'am.
What do you think about the book Nothing But the Truth by Avi and why it was selected for the whole school to read?
Well, I thought it was a good book, but personally I believe the book was selected for us to teach us about telling the truth and being respectful to others. That's basically what I thought of it.
That sounds like a good reason. How about you, Bridget?
I thought the book was very good. I thought it was chosen because, and I agree with James, it shows an important lesson of how you always have to tell the truth, and if you twist words around, it could actually ruin someone's reputation.
Right, that was pretty interesting. How about you, Gabrielle?
I thought it was a thought-provoking book that showed us how one little thing can get completely blown out of proportion.
Absolutely. It started so subtly, right? It kind of crept up on you that this story that Philip was telling, just became bigger and bigger and more complex.
Yeah.
So, Mr. Clark, what was your thinking for the team is selecting? So tell us about the process.
We thought
for the
about
book.
this last year, and we actually reached out to some of the English teachers to see if anybody had a good suggestion for some sort of a read. And when we got thinking about it, we thought about the fact that it was going to be the election season, right? We have this big election that's coming up, and there's so much going on during this election season, and there's all these accusations of who's telling the truth and who's telling lies, and things get really twisted because when you hear a story, there's lots of different facts you can put into that story, or you can leave out of that story, right? And truth is a kind of a relative statement, right? One person's truth might not be another person's truth. So I think, kind of the importance from our point of view is to kind of getting to the truth and helping kids to understand that just because somebody said something or you heard something, that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to take that at face value, that you should be your own discoverer of the truth and to kind of ferret out information. And that's important as a citizen to, during the election season, to figure out, to dig a little bit deeper. So that's where our thinking was, I think.
And I think it's really connected to some of the goals, the 21st century goals that we've been talking about in our strategic coherence plan, which is, ethical civic responsibility, really making sure, because it is, it's an ethical dilemma, when you, in the case with Philip, who was really focused on running, right? Mm-hmm. And, he wanted to do everything possible to make sure he could continue to do that. And then, the story around how he eventually, tries to keep running and then makes it the fact that he is no longer able to run or cut from the team, his teacher's problem is really a very interesting development. So what do you think about that message? What message do you think you gained from reading the book? I'll start with you, Bridget.
I thought the message I gained was to always be respectful to everyone I cross paths with, because if you're not respectful, things could get blown out of proportion, and it could kind of go back and forth, oh, this person said something, I said something, and to always be respectful.
That's a great message. How about you, Gabrielle?
I gained that you should find out all the facts before you conclude a situation and side with someone who could be potentially wrong.
I gotcha. That was huge. How about you, James?
The most important message I believe I gained was to always tell the complete truth and be respectful, as per Bridget said. So henceforth, basically, if you say a certain thing and leave out certain details, per Mr. Clark, basically things could get turned around and twisted on you, and then it could always end up blowing up in your face.
What a mess, right? That
Yes.
something so small became so huge. So in terms of the way that this book was written, because I think it's pretty interesting that it's written kind of like as a play, but I guess it's called a documentary novel. So, Gabrielle, I'll start with you. Why do you think that the author, Avi, used this style of kind of like a play, to tell the story? Like, what are your thoughts about that?
I think he used this to make the story more realistic. Documentary novels use memos, diary entries, letters, and dialogue, which makes the reader feel like they're witnessing it themselves.
That's so awesome. You're spot on. How about you, Jane?
Personally, I agree with Gabriella. Well, I just basically said that, same thing as her, I just said that he chose this basically to give each character their own personal account, and that way they can give their feelings.
That's great. Absolutely. And Bridget?
I also agree with Gabrielle. This style of writing really shows how each character feels about the certain situation currently going on.
That's great. Mr. Clark, did you hear what they said?
Yeah.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah, and I agree, because I think that, the whole idea of, trying to get to the truth, right? Again, it involves a lot of listening and hearing different people's points of views, but not only that, kind of like, why do people want to believe what they want to believe, right? The whole idea of, did you ever hear the expression, don't let the truth get in the way of a good story?
Yeah.
Yeah? Okay. So some people want to spin a story, and they don't, because that's what they want people to know, or that's what they want people. And that's great if it's meant for entertainment purposes, but news reporters aren't really supposed to be storytellers.
Yeah.
Right? So when people are telling their version of the truth, try to influence other people, a lot of times we have to figure out why. What's their purpose for trying to, get their version of the story out. What's behind, their truth.
And you know what, Mr. Clark, that's an interesting point. So I'm going to throw another question at you that's, you're going to be able to respond to. So do you think that Philip deliberately was misrepresenting the facts, James?
Well, yes, I believe that he was misrepresenting the facts because he basically was telling his side of the story, basically saying that he was doing everything correctly, even though he got reprimanded from his teacher in order to stop, even though he kept saying it was his patriotic duty in order to sing along, even though clearly he doesn't know the words as per stated in the last few chapters of the book.
It was a surprise.
Yeah.
How about you, Bridget? Do you think that he deliberately misrepresented the facts?
Yeah, because he really, really wanted to get on the track team, and he didn't want to tell his parents that he was not doing so good in English, and he was kind of like, I'm not doing good because everyone doesn't like the teacher, and he wanted to make it seem like he wasn't the only one that was not doing so good.
Exactly. And Gabrielle?
I think he did do it on purpose because, as Bridget said, he couldn't be on the track team because he was failing English. So he was able to do anything he could to get on it, and that means getting his teacher in trouble.
So your position. So who do you side with in this story? Is it the English teacher? Because let me ask you this question. As I was reading that, having been a teacher, I was saying to myself, did Miss Narwin ever have a conversation with Philip? because I was always curious, like, why the two of them had such different stories or perspectives, right? That she was like, if her version of the story of Philip was very complimentary, right? She thought he was smart. Obviously, yes, he seemed to be doing some things that required her to address him, and I guess she called him lazy, right? But it didn't sound like she really had anything against him, but I never really felt that there was anything in the story that suggested that she had reached out to him, that they weren't communicating. Did anybody else have that concern or that kind of curiosity, James?
Well, personally, I agree with you on that matter, that she didn't have a conversation with him, but I still side with Miss Narwin on this situation. Even though my fellow peers may side with Philip, I side with Miss Narwin because, well, she was just doing her job, and if a child gets reprimanded 3 times, they get sent to the vice principal. But even though I side with you on the matter that she didn't have a conversation with him.
Yeah, that was interesting to me. How about you, Bridget?
I also side with Miss Narwin because she really didn't do anything wrong, and Philip, he made up this whole lie because he did not like her and he wanted to get on the track team. So, in my opinion, Philip did the wrong thing on the situation.
Mm-hmm. How about you, Gabrielle?
I agree that she didn't approach him, but I think she stated that she didn't want to get into his background.
Exactly.
So I agree with Miss Narwin because he actually deliberately hummed the national anthem, but she said it was in a loud, raucous, disrespectful manner multiple times. So he caused a disturbance in class, and so that's why she had to send him to the principal's office.
There was also sort of, it seemed to me, this is, in my opinion, that there was also a communications issue between Miss Narwin and the assistant principal, right? Dr.
Poleni.
That, he's, her sending him to the assistant principal automatically. Of course, it was 2 times that he was sent that week. I guess that's the punishment, that he would be suspended. So that just seemed that was also a curiosity to me. Was it a curiosity to anyone else? How about you, James?
Yeah, personally, I kind of agree with you on that matter.
Okay, Gabrielle.
The communication in that school wasn't very good.
It wasn't.
They all didn't know what was going on.
Oh, how big is that school, right?
Yeah.
How about you, Bridget?
Yeah, I also agree. It was kind of like the game Telephone, where
Yes.
it goes down and then it gets twisted.
It does.
Yeah.
It absolutely. That's a great way to characterize it. Now, how might this story be different if this was done in a time, in our present day setting, where social media is so much a part of all of our lives? So if what would be different? They use newspapers, which, how many of you actually read the newspaper?
Yeah, sometimes.
Sometimes the paper version of the newspaper.
I'll look at it.
You'll look at it,
occasionally.
yeah. But by and large, most young people now, right, use either Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, something or another. So do you think the story would be different, or would things be different? How would they be different, Gabrielle?
I think it would be different because this novel was written in 1991, and social media would have made the situation blown up even worse. Social media is instant, and more people of all ages have access to it, and this can create unsafe conditions for the person who is falsely accused.
That's what I was thinking. How about you, James?
Well, I agree with Gabrielle that if social media was used, it would be able to get to the masses more quickly, and then people would have just kept taking sides, and then fights and riots would have started over who was correct.
There you go. How about you, Bridget?
Well, I feel social media would have gave Miss Nerwin a chance to spread her side of the story, and it wouldn't be so one-sided because people only heard Philip's side and his patriotism. But if they heard why he actually got suspended for calling out and being disruptive, maybe they wouldn't be so one-sided and set on Philip.
Exactly. It's kind of interesting, Mr. Clark, right, where her story was not worthy of being printed, right? So she really never even got her story out.
Right. Yeah, and I think that, it's I think many of us have like conflicts sometimes because of big ideas like patriotism, right? We don't want to appear unpatriotic, so the story is no longer about what happened in the classroom. Now the story becomes a contest over whether or not people are patriotic or not. They lose sight of what the whole original issue was, right? So it's not about right or wrong. It's about, if you don't agree with me, you're not patriotic, right? And people will throw that in your face, and that's not true. That's sort of like taking a left turn in the argument and focusing on something else that people are sort of passionate about.
Yeah.
So
What do you say about that, James?
Well, I agree with Mr. Clark that saying basically, if you're in an argument about one specific thing, let's use the argument in the book, for example, how he was humming the national anthem. Per Mr. Clark, the things could take a left turn, and then they could focus on the patriotism of Philip's actions. And even though he stated himself that he was just trying to be patriotic and hum the national anthem, he might have still been in the wrong because he was talked to about this, and, well, not really talked to, but, like, told to stop. But, yes, I agree with Mr. Clark on this said matter.
Absolutely, absolutely. And Bridget, would you recommend this book to other students? And if so or not, why?
Well, it depends which student I'm talking to or recommending the book to. Because it does teach a very important lesson to always be respectful and tell the truth. But on the other hand, the book is very, very repetitive. And it repeats itself quite a lot. So
It's like a little soap opera, right?
Yeah.
Paperback soap opera. Gabrielle.
I would definitely recommend this book because both teachers and students can relate to this book. We see similar situations in the news today, like with the elections. If Philip was just doing his job as a student and took responsibility for his poor actions, he would not have been failing and could have stayed on the track team. And students would enjoy this book because it has its share of surprises and most of all, irony.
Yes, it does. A lot of irony. How about you, James? Would you
Yes.
recommend this?
Yeah, I would, to any student of any caliber in our school, because first of all, it's a great read, and it teaches a great lesson to people, basically, which is always telling the truth and never let the one side of a story get more focused on than the other side of the story.
Yes.
But yes, I also agree with Gabriella's point, how she was saying, basically, what was it you said again, Gabrielle?
It's full of surprises.
And irony.
Yes.
a
Exactly.
little twist at the end, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So, Mr. Clark, what are your thoughts about the impact of this book on the student body? Is this something that you think that has resonated or that students have taken to heart? Do you see examples of children really thinking about the impact of choices that they make and decisions that they make?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the whole idea behind doing like a school-wide read is basically so we all sort of have the same frame of reference, right? So when we're talking about something, we can all be sort of on the same page in the conversation. And it was interesting. I sat in on Mr. Schnitzler's classroom when they were talking about the book, and at first some people were complaining about the book. They were saying that they didn't like the book, and when we clarified that, we were like, well, why didn't you like the book? And then they were annoyed at this person and they were annoyed at that person. So the reason that they didn't like the book were things that they felt strongly about.
Yes.
Right? So, and that was the whole idea, was to kind of get, when I first read the book, I found it kind of repetitive, like you said. But, I couldn't stop reading because I wanted to see what was going to happen. So, I just think that it's a good idea to carry the message through the year, and that's what we've been trying to do with the book last year, Counting by Sevens, and with the book this year. And that's why we sort of came up with this whole idea of like, let's have these monthly themes so that we can talk about these things, and instead of just, how a lot of times you read a book and then you're done and you don't even think about it again.
Yeah.
This is to just like have it cycle through the year for us, and we actually came up with a bunch of different monthly themes so that we can talk about it throughout the year, and just kind of, again, as part of like our social emotional piece, like have these discussions. And I think it's effective. It's hard to measure if it's effective, but a lot of kids seem to want to do the right thing. And I think that's partially because we have just great kids here, but it's partially because I think we instill that message. It's good to be honest. It's okay to stand up for what you believe in, or if you see something wrong, it's okay to talk to an adult about it. So it just gives people a voice and a reason to stand up for what they believe in.
You know what, Mr. Clark and Mr. Lamoureux, since it's the three of us who are the adults here, I think there are so many lessons for adults. I mean, the person who, to me, who affected me the most in the story that I had the most difficulty with was Dr. Seymour, the superintendent.
Yeah.
And, his level of dishonesty and modeling was just very disturbing. So I thought that this was really a great book for just on courage, as adults, and students, you have to have courage, even if, you have a difficult situation, there's pressure, you're worried about, what other people think about you. You have to have courage at the end of the day, and you have to have a good ethical foundation, to make the right decisions no matter what. So this was, I think, just as relevant for children as it is for adults.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree with you more.
So, thank you so much, Gabrielle Sentalis, James Hartigan,
Thank you for having me.
and Bridget Courtney. And I thank Dr. Clark. He will be Dr. Clark one day, real soon. He's working on his
Studying,
doctorate.
I'm trying.
Mr. Clark, and then Mr. Lamoureux, who's so wonderful about helping us to take advantage of this opportunity to create this podcast.
Thank you.
So, and on three, could we say, have a good day? 1, 2, 3.
Have a
Have a
good
good
day.
day.